Welcome to the Undercovers football podcast. I'm Ben with Paul, and we have a very, exciting a week and couple weeks ahead as the football season gets here. So a lot of fun stuff to talk about tonight. With the main emphasis being on, of course, training camp, which has started this week for some teams already, and I believe most other teams will kick off their training camps this week. But Paul, I'm very happy that football is finally back. I don't know about you.
I'm so happy that football is back. I was literally at the ballpark literally just a few days ago just to watch as a fan for Bison's game, and then I'm just sitting here talking baseball strategy in the bottom of the 10th inning and
Mm-hmm.
of a game. I was like, I can't wait for football to be back. I'm talking baseball strategy. I need some football strategy back.
Right, 100%. And the Bills will start practice on Wednesday, so we'll talk about that in a bit. But before that, let's get into some of the big news from the week. Starting off with Brandon Ayuk officially demanding a trade. And this isn't really the first, I guess, rodeo you should call with the 49ers. They kind of had a similar situation a couple years ago, if you remember, when Debo was kind of holding out a little bit and they eventually paid Debo, but now money is obviously getting tighter and they got to pay Purdy. And they also drafted a receiver in the first round and another receiver fairly early. And Jennings actually would have been probably Super Bowl MVP if San Fran could have found a way to win that. So, I mean, they have some talent there
Mhm.
already. But is it a mistake for the 49ers to trade Brandon Ayuk? I say no because then the Bills can get and we could have Khalil Shakir, Brandon Ayuk, and Keon Coleman. No, but seriously, I mean, even if the Niners traded Ayuk, and I hear it a lot. I know Schefter posted early. If they're going for a Super Bowl, they wouldn't trade Ayuk, but we kind of saw a similar situation in Buffalo, and of course, a lot of the outsiders don't think the Bills are going for a Super Bowl, and obviously there's a difference between Purdy and Allen, but I still think Purdy's a good quarterback, and they have CMC, they still have Debo, and they drafted Ricky Pearsall, and of course they have Jennings. So I know Kittle's starting to get a little older, but they drafted a tight end last year. And I think I forgot who else they signed. I think they signed another tight end in the offseason. But either way, um, I think they can trade Brandon Ayuk, and I think it's because of that offensive system. I'm not saying Ayuk isn't a great receiver; he definitely is. But I think in that Shanahan offense, they can find replacements. It may not be one for one, but it could be 2 for 1 or 3 for 1 if you get more production from Debo. You got Jacob Cowing, who I really liked, and then Ricky Pearsall, who a lot of people. I mean, obviously he went to Florida, so I wasn't as high on him just because of that. But I mean, strictly from a football perspective, Pearsall's a pretty good receiver.
I don't necessarily disagree with you. I think, from a business standpoint, I don't think this would be a bad trade. I mean, the 49ers are projected to be in bottom 3 in cap space next year. I think they're projected to be like $33 million over
Sure.
the cap next offseason. So if you spend big on Brandon Ayuk, that means you're probably losing a guy or two that is super important to your team.
A hundred
And
percent.
that's where the 49ers are at this point. You trade Ayuk, you keep building and extending your window, or you sign Ayuk and your window starts to close quickly and you only have a
Hmm.
certain amount of time before you have to tear it down and rebuild it back up.
Right. And the thing is, they kind of already paid their offensive superstar, which was McCaffrey, and that offense runs through Christian McCaffrey. And I think
It does.
everything else just funnels through him. So the other pieces are important, but I think for a team like that, they still have two or three other solid weapons that I think Pearsall will be good enough this year and going forward. Where I think San Fran can trade Ayuk and still be a Super Bowl contender. I mean, even if they keep Ayuk, with the moves Green Bay made and Love, going into his second year as a full-time starter, with the Lions still being a very strong team and adding to that defense. And now you might see more out of a guy like Jamison Williams now that he's a couple years removed from the ACL. So maybe that offense and year two for Jahmyr Gibbs, who I was really high on, in Sam Laporta. So maybe their offense can find another level,
Hmm.
especially, St. Brown showed what he could do last year. Can he take it to another level? So that will be interesting. I mean, they nearly beat him last year. And
They
I
should
know a
have,
lot of
honestly.
people, I think it's just because they're just not a likable uh, sports town in general and their fans, but I still think people are sleeping on Philly. Like, they made the moves they needed in the offseason, and then especially in the draft, like, they drafted two good corners, and they also will get Isaiah Rodgers back from suspension, and they added Bryce Huff, and they have Fangio come in there. And say what you want about Miami's defense, but Fangio, he made an impact as far as that Miami's defense. They're playing well at the end of the year, especially down several key pieces. Like, they still kept them in games, especially that Bills game. Like, I mean, we saw it week 18. Like, the Miami defense was tougher than I think a lot of people gave them credit. But let's move on to our next topic.
All right. The next topic comes from the NFL executives ranking the top 10 quarterbacks a week after we finished our top 10 quarterbacks. How ironic is that? They ranked Josh Allen third behind Burrow and Mahomes. Ben, do you think Josh Allen was ranked fairly, or was he one spot too low?
I mean, I know I kind of trashed Joe Burrow in my ranking, but a lot of that had to do with just strictly how last year ended. I still think Joe Burrow, when healthy, is probably one of the 4 or 5 best quarterbacks in football. Um, and until Josh gets the hardware, I mean, he'll just have to be wherever people feel like putting him. It just
Hmm.
is what it is. Like, I mean, I know we're biased, and I truly think Josh is the second best quarterback, but until he wins the ring, he'll have all the arguments against him. And I think the best way for him to dismiss that is to win a ring. And if he wins a couple rings, he'll have a very legit argument for number one. But I think it's definitely fair. Now, if he's anywhere lower than 4, then I think that's just stupid. But even 4 is ridiculous. I think at the worst, he's number 3.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think, like you said, we're biased and we think like he's the second best quarterback in the league, but I honestly think he is the second best quarterback in the league. I think there's an argument there for Joe Burrow as well. But I mean, it feels like Josh Allen every year is just breaking a new record every single year. He's the reason why the Bills are in a spot to compete every season for the division and for the division and for possibly the AFC championship, and gives him a fighting chance to get to the Super Bowl. Joe Burrow just hasn't been healthy enough. When healthy, Joe Burrow is a top 10 quarterback in the league. I still think he's still top three. I just feel like Josh Allen has proved more than what Joe Burrow has over the last 4 or 5 years.
Like I said earlier, I mean, both Burrow and Allen are very good. And I mean, you put their numbers up side by side. Also, I think the fact that Burrow's beat him head to head twice, like, I get it. You know, I think wins to a certain extent aren't a quarterback stat, but that's what people look at the end of the day. And that's,
Hmm.
even if you look at the Bills Chiefs game, like, put Allen's stats head to head, and Allen's outperformed Mahomes in almost all of those games since that first playoff game we met them in. And overall stats, I believe Allen has better numbers in the Chiefs versus Bills rivalries than Mahomes. But unfortunately, Mahomes has won it when it mattered every single time. It's not like Allen even has one. So, I mean, the Bills definitely, I think, I mean, until they, I hate to say this, but almost until they can get that monkey out their back, like I don't like Josh is probably just gonna be at number 3 to some people just because Burrow has beat Mahomes in the playoffs. And I think the logic is flawed, but it is what it is. But let's get on to our trivia for tonight.
All right, so our trivia is, I think this is fairly simple. If you follow Bill's training camp, kind of. Where did the Bills host training camp before St. John Fisher started in 2000?
So most recently, or like
So what was the
right
one? Where was the
right
Bills
before,
before? Yeah,
I
before
believe
St. John.
it was Fredonia, right? At SUNY
Yes,
Fredonia. All right,
yes, it
nice.
was
So
fairly simple.
yeah,
Fairly simple for that.
that one it was pretty easy, but I know Connor wouldn't get that, but he also is a newer Bills fan. But let's get into our Bills topics for the night, and well, let's just start off with just overall main focus for the Bills this training camp, and I think it's gonna be a couple key positional battles, and actually one of them I'll start off with number one. I'm interested in seeing what the safety room defensive backs, I mean,
Hmm.
primarily safeties, you know, who starts opposite Taylor Rapp, or could Cole Bishop possibly compete? And what does the depth look like? How many safeties do we see? I mean, does DeMar Hamlin keep up, the the great performance he had at mini camp and OTAs. And if he has a good training camp, maybe he can get some playing time. So that will be interesting. But also the cornerback battle. I think Kyer Elam is going to have something to say about that job opposite Douglas, or even opposite Benford, whatever it pans out. Like, I think the Bills have three very talented, corners in that room who all are good enough to start, and it will be interesting to see how it panned out because Elam started more games as a rookie, and he performed, I think, well enough to get a starting job the next year.
Hmm.
But he had to battle at camp, which Christian Benford ultimately won for the job opposite Tre'Davious White. Now, will will Benford just get handed the job again, or will they both battle for it? That will be interesting, especially with a new defensive coordinator, a new defensive backs coach. Um, and then the center position is another one I'm intrigued by to see. Does Cedric Van Pran Granger make a push to start? I think he will. I don't know if he does immediately, but I think he will be the starting center within a couple years. But just as far as positional battles, I would say those probably the couple I'm looking forward to. Obviously, you got the lower end positions like depth battles, but I think if you were to identify like starting jobs that are truly up for grab, there's probably like about really three. I mean, maybe you could say wide receiver three, or any of the wide receivers. But I mean, that's obviously something we're going to talk about later. So, I mean,
Yeah, I think the safety battle is going to be the one of the most watched positional battles on the during Bill's training camp. You
yep.
know, it's brand new. It's going to be brand new for this season, and it's going to be something to
Yeah.
watch for
I mean,
with the new defensive secondaries
s-
coach.
this is going, I mean, this is going to be the first time in the Sean McDermott era that
Hmm.
we have not had both either Jordan Poyer or Micah Hyde, but we don't have both of them. And this is the first time since 2016 we've had a different starting a safety duo, and obviously that was pre McDermott. So there's obviously, some change in that aspect. But I mean, obviously, if you know me, I've kind of been calling for change, at least in one area for, I would say, probably about just a little bit over the past year since last offseason. So I am looking forward to it, but I also understand it's going to be an adjustment. So we'll see how it goes. But I like some of the talent in that room.
I do too. And I think they probably will keep about maybe 5 safeties,
Yeah, I think
possibly. I think
5 is the max, so they'll go at safety. Maybe they find a way to roster Cam Lewis as a corner, and then uh, so we'll see. Maybe it's Rapp, Edwards, Bishop, Hamlin, and Delaney. Like, I think that
yeah, I
could be a
think
solid
that's your
safety
core.
room.
I think that's probably your safety room entering the season. I mean, if you throw just a thought that just popped in my head. If you throw Cam Lewis to the practice squad to say they wanted to keep 4 safeties and Cam Lewis is the odd man out, I mean, chances are he's probably not going to get picked up. I mean, he could. I mean, he
Yeah,
could
I
play
think
safety
I
and corner,
guess
but
I guess it's just kind of like y- you're kind of just gonna have to play a risk and see, wait until the injury dominoes go
mhm,
down. But if you just look at kind of the history, like most of the ex Bills defensive backs that played with McDermott have gotten a decent payday or have gotten picked up by other teams. I mean, the only one who really hasn't would be Hyde, but we all know he said he would only sign with Buffalo, and he's also
mhm,
older with injury concerns. But I mean, pretty much every one of our corners who played and started, you got Trey White. I mean, I know it's not that big of a deal, but he got a decent payday, especially coming off injury. Levi Wallace, of course, and now Dane Jackson with Carolina. So for some reason, and I think it's also just because of how well McDermott has coached the D backs, the defensive backs, but there seems to be, around the league. Even look at Alex Austin. Like, he got picked up and he was a
mhm,
seventh rounder. Like, it seems like other teams know that we know how to scout and know
mhm.
talent for defensive backs.
Absolutely.
So they kind of are like, hey, if we need a guy and the Bills gave up on him, it might just not be because he's not good. It's just because we have so many good, depth pieces. Um, but other than that, I mean, do you have any other positional battles that you think could be of note besides the wide receivers before we talk about that next?
Other than the wide receivers, I don't think there's any other major battles. I think you touched on, the center battle. I think, that's important. But I think the one of the main focuses that I'm going to be watching on, throughout the off season, throughout the training camp process is Josh Allen and the chemistry he's going to build with the
But
new wide receivers. you
sure,
know, how does that grow and how does it look? What is Joe Brady kind of calling? Obviously, they're not going to show too much, but like, what are we? How are we using Keon Coleman? And where does Khalil Shakir or Curtis Samuel line up on the Bills' offensive wide receivers? I mean, are they in slot? Is Khalil Shakir going to get some outside time? And like the chemistry with them. Is it does Josh Allen, struggle early on to find his wide receivers early on, or is it an instant connection? So I think
right.
those are some of the main focuses I'm kind of watching, with Josh Allen and the new look offense as same thing. The new look secondary is like, how does it look?
Yeah, now speaking of wide receivers, how comfortable should we be with the Bills' top 3 receivers? And I actually think we should feel more than comfortable with the Bills' top 3 receivers. Yeah, would you like a Brandon Ayuk or maybe an Amari Cooper or someone else via trade? Sure, like, why not add talent? I mean, it should be with any position. You should always, pretty much outside of starting quarterback, because you really can't find an available quarterback better than Josh Allen on the open
Mhm,
market or anywhere really besides maybe Patrick Mahomes. But you should always be looking to add talent to your team, even if you already have talent at positions. It leads to depth. It leads to competition and, other guys, improving just because of the competition. So I think if the Bills were to add a wide receiver, that would only make the offense that much more deadly. But I think also people are getting caught up with the names, and the Bills do have
mhm.
a decent amount of talent at this wide receiver position right
They
now.
do.
Now, I think some of them who we'll talk about more in a bit on the lower end of the roster have some talent, but just, for whatever reason have had some maybe injury and other issues the past couple seasons. But I mean, they have multiple guys who have all produced within the 600, 900, to 800 area in the past already. I mean, they have guys with size, guys, who can play the slot, and outside guys with speed. So, I mean, they have a lot of different elements, something that we really, I don't think, have had since maybe 2020 and even 2020, I would say. And since, like, we still haven't really had a true big body receiver with Josh,
Mhm.
like a Keon Coleman or even a Matt Collins. I'll throw in Claypool as well. I mean, Davis, like, as big as he was, there's really, like, maybe only a couple plays you can look to where you say, like, he, like, not that he played to his size, but he really used his size on a
Mhm.
play. Like, a lot of the plays, he was either wide open. I mean, he did have a couple great toe tapping plays, but as far as being physical, I mean, you got the Minka Fitzpatrick catch, but other than that, on most, like, 50-50s, I would say, I mean, on like jump balls, you didn't really see that a lot
Mhm.
since the first year we had Stephon Diggs, and even then, he's still not, the biggest receiver. So, I think, like, back shoulder fades are something we'll see a lot more of because we have multiple guys, not just Coleman and of course, uh, Hollins or Claypool, but also those tight ends as well. So, I think when you account for the tight ends and even Cook, I don't think you should be concerned with the Bills' weapons because Joe Brady showed last year that, especially when we were 6-6, and that's without a full season to install his plays, and basically needing to go, what, 6-1 to end the season after he took over to win the division,
Yep.
and then of course 1-1 in the playoffs. But since Brady as the Bills offensive coordinator is something like 7-2, so now give him a full off season and give him a whole season to start off with it. And I mean, I think we could definitely see this offense even take another step forward because he showed last year that he didn't need Davis and Diggs for the offense to be deadly and efficient. And now you have some interesting new pieces. So I'm actually excited to see how this offense looks.
I'm excited too. I mean, just that little snippet of the Bills embedded yesterday was like, the first thing that came into my mind with that was the intensity level is different with Joe Brady than it
Mm-hmm.
was with Ken Dorsey. Joe Brady is in coaching. Like he's actually physically coaching. Like if he sees something, he's going to say something, and he's actually, working with the wide receivers. He's running with them. He's getting into Josh's face, and like as like synchronized pressure. So like the intensity level is going to be different with Joe Brady, and that's what makes me feel comfortable with our top three. There is still the uncertainty that floats in your minds, like how does it look? Kind of like we were just talking about before. How does it look? Is the chemistry there? I think early on it's gonna look slow. It's gonna look different. It's gonna take some time to build up to, but by I would say maybe mid-season, I think Josh Allen and the top three wide receivers for the Buffalo Bills are going to be full sailing, and this offense is just going to be super super hard to stop. And again, like you said, Keon Coleman brings a different aspect than any other wide receiver the Bills had over the last 3 seasons. Dalton Kincaid. We'll talk a little bit about him later on in the show, but you know hit the importance of Dalton Kincaid, from what his rookie season is this season, is going to be way more important than what any other tight end that the Bills had. They had Dawson Knox, but they still have Dawson Knox, but Dawson Knox role has changed because we have now a new a new athletic tight end that could do way much more and
Sure.
diversify this offense.
But you also have to remember that even when we had, a healthy Knox and a healthy Kincaid, and Knox went
Mhm,
down, it really wasn't until Joe Brady took over that Kincaid, you know, really started showing something. And by that point, Knox was already on IR, and by the time Knox came back, they were, fully, their offense was kind of immersed with Kincaid in it, and there was really no reason to switch it up. Now, Knox still made some plays in the running game, and of course he caught that touchdown against Miami to put us up
mhm.
week 18. But I actually I think Knox could actually have a solid season, given now Brady has a full offseason to kind of figure out how he wants to use each one of his tight ends, and maybe Knox will be used, as more of a downfield threat, which he's actually shown in the past that he could be a good deep threat, like that touchdown, of course, against the Chiefs, of course, but also I believe it was his rookie year where he caught that bomb against New England right before the end of half, where Dion scored that touchdown, if you remember. And
I
then
do.
I think he scored, or I think he had another long reception against New England. I think 2023 in that game, obviously. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think Knox can be a decent weapon, but let's move on to our next topic.
Yeah, the wide receiver battle. It's not going to be a wide receiver battle for the top three, like who could sneak in. It's going to be the battle for probably the last spot for the wide receivers. So Ben, who do you think, gets the fifth or sixth wide receiver spot on the
So
Bills
this is
roster?
gonna be an interesting, I think, debate and question over the next couple of weeks, and I guess maybe month and a half of camp before they cut down to the 53-man roster. Um, but I think the number one question is, could the Bills maybe try to keep 7 receivers, just kind of due to
Yeah.
some of the new kickoff
Hmm.
rules? Maybe they want a guy like Hamler to be used as a returner. So it's going to be interesting to see um, how many receivers they keep, but obviously b who the receivers are. So
How many do you think
five
they're
and
going to keep?
six. Yeah, I'll say six just for this exercise. I mean, I could see seven, but I'll until we really get more into camp and I see, how it's looking. I can't really say for sure if we're going with seven or if there's even seven good enough or 7 receivers good enough. But if I had to say right now, um, I would go. So you obviously got. I would probably say it's Mac Hollins, and I would say KJ Hamler, or I mean possibly Chase Claypool and Hamler, but I think it's gonna be. I think Hamler makes the roster just because of his speed, and he provides a different dynamic to the offense. I know Shakir has some speed as well. And then obviously Samuel has got 4.3 speed. But I really think they end up keeping KJ Hamler. Now, the interesting battle, I guess, will be who is a better wide receiver in the year 2024, Chase Claypool
Hmm.
or Matt Collins. They have similar skill sets in some regards. I would say um, Hollins definitely has the advantage just because of his special team ability. But as far as on the field play, I think you could argue that they might be about the same level right now, or even Chase Claypool might be more explosive. So you keep the more explosive player. Now Hollins might be more consistent, and obviously he doesn't have the baggage that the that Claypool had, but from what I've seen, and it looks like Claypool has really bought in and wants to be here. So I guess we'll have to see. But if you're going just from on the field, I guess you can make an argument for Claypool over Hollins, but that's why I could also seeing them keeping 7 because that way you can still keep Hollins, Claypool, and Hamler.
I think 7's a long shot. I guess it's again just how they feel with the wide receiver room. If you take
But
an
you
extra wide receiver,
you
where are you taking it from?
well, you don't have a couple core special teamers from last year's roster like Undercovers or
Mhm.
Saran Neal, so those guys aren't locking up a roster spot. So theoretically, you got 2 newer roster spots available, and I would also say that we've never had 7 wide receivers good enough to make the team.
Mhm.
So I think this year's a little bit different just as far as how much depth we have. Maybe we didn't need to keep 7 wide receivers when we had Isaiah Hodgins or the Tavon Austins in training camp. But now when we actually have 7 or even 8 legit guys who I think a real question is, can a guy like Justin Shorter potentially make things interesting and shake up this wide receiver competition?
He could.
Because he was drafted last year in the 5th round, and does Bean just want to let a recent asset just go away like that, especially considering he already lost out on 2 of those draft picks from that class
Mhm.
already. So right now, all he has to show for that draft class is Dalton Kincaid and Osiris Torrance. Obviously, when you come away with 2 high impact starters like that, that is a good draft. And you still have obviously Dorian Williams, but I'm not sure if Beans is going to let go of an asset like that so quickly, especially if Shorter can prove he can play special teams.
This team is, we all know Sean McDermott and, the value for special teams. So, I mean, if he shows that he can go out there, be physical, and go play special teams, I think that gives him a really good shot to make the roster. I think the Bills keep about 6. I don't think they'll go lower than 6, for depth reasons. And, just if you go with 5, then one gets hurt, then you're down to 4. So I don't think the Bills would do that. So I
Right.
think they'll keep 6. And you went, I think you went Holland and you went Hamler. Both of those guys I was going to go with, so I'm going to switch it up. And I think I'm gonna stick with Hollins because I don't think he's a for sure lock, but I think he's about 75% of the way there to be a
Okay.
lock for the Bills
Sure.
roster. Wanna go Chase Claypool. You went Hamler, I'm gonna go Claypool, just to give a different twist. I think Hamler has a good shot to make the roster for all the reasons you said. He brings just a different element to the Bills wide receiver room that some of these other wide receivers don't have. But if the Bills want to go the physical route, big wide receiver, I think that's where Chase Claypool really has a shot to make the roster. And I kind of feel like with how the Bills are trying to work or construct the roster, having two big guys on the outside really, really does open up a lot of things for the guys underneath, like, Shakir and Samuel. So you have, you know, Claypool one side, Coleman on the other. Who do you going to cover underneath? Because let's say we're at week 14 and, Claypool's having a decent season, Coleman's having a great season. It's like, who do we want to cover on the outside? Someone's going to be open in the middle of the field. And I think it opens the middle of the field for the Buffalo Bills if they have 2 really good outside threats with, Claypool and Coleman.
Okay, so you went Claypool and Hollins. I like that. So we talked about Dalton Kincaid earlier. Let's talk more about him now. What are you thinking for Dalton Kincaid production? Now, he was a top 10 tight end last year, not just fantasy wise, but actual real production wise, as far as receptions and receiving yards, and he set the Bills franchise record for, I think, tight end receptions, right, in a season as a rookie.
Yes. Hmm.
Not just rookie tight end receptions, but franchise tight end receptions. So he proved that he can be a very reliable target for Josh. And now you have a bunch of targets available, vacant with the loss of not only Diggs and Davis, but Sherfield as well and Hardy. So all those little targets, Murray. So that's like 5 players that, probably made up something like 225 targets last year. So
Hmm.
it's going to be a big, I think, Dalton Kincaid season for the Bills. So when we get into our fantasy special, that's definitely going to be one of the big topics. But just a little word of advice. I mean, if you play fantasy, try to get your hands on Dalton Kincaid, and I think you'll probably hear that from a lot of fantasy experts.
Hmm.
But I think it's going to be true. And for me, I think the ceiling is actually like 12, 1,300 yards and like 8 touchdowns. That's the ceiling.
That's
I'll
the ceiling.
go realistic. I think the floor is around 850 plus. So I'll say he gets like 900 to 1,000, 90 to 95 catches, and between 6 to 8 touchdowns, which it still would be like top five production from a tight end. And I mean, that's still a big time weapon. Yes, you would probably like more from your number one receiving option, but I think the Bills this year are just going to more or less do it in the aggregate. And say if Dawson Knox can even get, 400, maybe. I mean, I don't know if he'll get 500. We've seen him do it before. That might be a bit much for Knox, but if Knox can get 400 and Kincaid gets, 950, that's almost 1,500 yards, from your tight end room. I mean, that's a good chunk of your passing production. Then you got to figure Cook and Davis will at least combine for 500 plus. So that's like 2,000 passing yards. So then you basically just need like four or yeah, four of your receivers to average 500 receiving yards. So you'd hope that, Coleman can get about 500-600 plus as a rookie. I mean, obviously you want more, but that's the realistic. And then if Shakir can build off what he had last year, and if Curtis Samuel can just even give you what he had in Washington, then you only would need like a couple hundred or maybe even less from an MVS for Josh to get to 4,000. So for all the people saying it's tough for Josh to get to 4,000, if Kincaid and Knox can do that, I don't think it will, and that's what I expect from not only Kincaid, but I'll say that the tight end room as a whole, and maybe Kincaid has 1,250 receiving yards, so then Knox only needs 250 to get um for them to combine for 1,500. I mean, if Kincaid though is 1,000 plus, like Josh could put up some career numbers even without Diggs or Davis. Like that's one of my bold takes, but I think it is possible if you actually look at the situation and look at how the offense is constructed.
I think, I Josh Allen, I think he's going to hit 4,000 yards with ease this season. I think, I'm not going to, lock it in, but I think he's going to get 4,000 yards. And I think, if you want a hot take, I think he can get close to 5,000 yards this season if, you know, everything of the Bills offense goes right and he gets hot and Coleman goes off and Shakir has a great season or Dalton Kincaid has a setting NFL setting season. Sam Laporta last year was 11 yards away from 900 yards. He had 8 touchdowns as well. So I'm thinking Dalton Kincaid could have a Sam Laporta type year. But if you look at Sam
Right.
Laporta, he's probably going over 1,000 yards this season. Being hit for him being almost 100 plus, just a little under 100 yards. Right around 100 yards away from 1,000 last season. So realistically, I think Dalton Kincaid can get you 950 yards and maybe triple up on his touchdowns, get 6 to 8 touchdowns with 950 yards. And I think that's a great season for Dalton Kincaid. And if he gets over 1,000 yards, so be it. And just will just add to the number of accolades that Dalton Kincaid can do it early enough in his season in his career. So I think Dalton Kincaid is going to be a pinnacle point for the Bills offense this season. And I'm not going to he's not going to run he's not going to be the person that the Bills are going to run through for this offense, but I think he has that ability to where things are not going right for the Bills offense, receiver wise, and the ground game is working, and they need to get a little bit more out of their pass game. I think then they're going to look to Dalton Kincaid to get their offensive going because he has that ability to spark plug this offense if needed. So I think Dalton Kincaid, production wise, is going to double from last season, and he should get close to 1,000 receiving yards this season. And I truly believe that. Just how the offense is going to run, I really feel like it's going to be tight end heavy, if that kind of makes sense, because you have Kincaid and Knox.
Also, some more Bills news. Deion Dawkins was number 96 on the NFL 100. So the Bills will have at least have one. I mean, obviously they'll have more than one, hopefully, or more than two, because Josh Allen is definitely on there. We'll see who else gets on there, but Deion comes in at number 96. So that is exciting for Deion. So congrats to Deion. And now, as we go to wrap up on training camp, who is going to be your biggest sleeper in camp? I know that's always a common question, and I think this year you have a lot of great candidates between Ray Davis, possibly. Um, obviously you got Dwayne Carter and Javon Solomon, and maybe Akai or Elam. I'll actually go a little bit outside the box, and for mine, I'm gonna go with Zach Davidson. He's a 6'7" tight end, and all the reports from minicamp said he played very well. He was placed on IR last year with a knee injury, so now that he's healthy, I'm interested in seeing what he can do. I mean, obviously we know who the top two are, but maybe he can, he can push Quentin Morris for a roster spot, or maybe we even keep um, four tight ends. So that will be interesting. But that's who my um, sleeper to watch. How about you?
My sleeper to watch is, I think, I don't think this is too bold, but I'm going to go Cole Bishop. I feel like he has a chance this training camp to take the starting role in the Buffalo Bills secondary. And do I feel right now where he's at, where he's going to start week one? No. I think Damar Hamlin has a really good shot at being the starting safety in that position for the Bills week one. But if Cole Bishop has a really good camp and Damar Hamlin, maybe doesn't have the same production as he did during OTAs, I think you have to ride Cole Bishop week one. And that's what I'm going to say. Cole Bishop is a sleeper, and he has a real shot to be your week one Bill starter at the safety position.
I like it. So we'll see how things shall shake up, here starting Wednesday and in the coming weeks. Next week, we should have a guest on, and hopefully the week after. But just some more NFL notes. The Dolphins are hosting Yannick Ngakoue. Now that isn't surprising after Shaq Barrett retired recently, and they got that cap space freed up. I mean, they desperately need another pass rusher both both Chubb and Phillips recovering from injuries. The Bengals team president Mike Brown says it's not so likely that this is a good time to negotiate with Jamar Chase. So that may not be good news as far as a contract extension, especially with
T.
a bunch
Higgins
of
walking.
receivers getting paid, and obviously, yeah, you have Higgins. And then this, I guess, is more of a meme, but Sam Darnold will receive a majority of first team reps in Vikings camp, and then some visits. Connor Williams also visited um, with the Seahawks, and Greg Van Roten visited with the Giants, as well as Byron Pringle visited with the Giants. Just some camp bodies. Probably nothing more than that. But
Giants Bills recruiter.
right. But that should do it for me, Paul. Unless you had any other thoughts, that should wrap it up for tonight.
I think that wraps it up for tonight. I mean, training camp is here. Football is finally back. It feels like the off season went a little slow. Not much news as it was like last year where we were bombshelled with news almost every week during the off season. Kind of a low key off season, but kind of enjoy the low key off season. You know, and now we're fully back. Can't wait. Football's almost here. All right.
Yeah, I
With
can't.
that,
Yeah, with that, that should do it. All right, so we will be back next week with a guest to review week 1 of training camp and look forward to week 2. Yes, let me cook. Thank you, Connor. Also, happy late birthday to Connor. And
yeah, happy late
congrats
birthday to Connor.
to Kyle Bush. Awesome birthday present. Just want to
Kyle
say
Larson.
you're Kyle Larson. Shoot, I do not know racing like that. My bad. I meant to say
Kyle.
Kyle Larson. I know there's a lot of Kyles. It's a common name in the race world apparently. But
It is a very common name. It
congrats
is.
to Kyle Larson and Connor. Obviously on that, but your early birthday present is a Bills Super Bowl and FSU national championship. By the way, or that's a delayed birthday
Let's have
present.
it happen in the
Yeah.
same year.
Exactly. So your delayed birthday present will be a Bills and FSU championship on top of the Larson win yesterday. But that should do it for tonight. Go Bills.
Go Bills.